Hi, my name is Karen on my channel, Straightway Ministries. I make videos about neurodiversity, mental health, and addiction issues from a Christ centered, faith based approach to teach life skills and foster awareness of mental health issues. Today I'm discussing my personal eating disorder story with food addiction. After many years of trying to find my way, I found finally feel like I'm making progress in finding recovery. Even though I'm pretty new and fresh at what I'm doing, I feel like my story is an important story to be told. I was born in the 70s. My parents and my family were rural Americans. We lived in a small village, and we ate pretty normally for our income level and our cultural background. My parents didn't allow us a lot of sugar, and our food was pretty normal. I grew up with undiagnosed autism. I've had mental health problems and emotional issues and behavioral issues my entire life. My issues with food were not present in my early childhood or anything. A lot of people with food addiction issues will tell you that they first developed their problem with food addiction from the moment that they were babies and that they were heavy toddlers and heavy preschoolers and heavy school age children, and they had to shop in the chubby section, and that wasn't the issue with me. It was the 1980s when I was growing up, and we played outside all day. We did have Kool-Aid. I wasn't allowed to have soda all the time, but we weren't allowed to have Kool-Aid all the time either. My issues with weight first started in my adolescence when I was put on psychiatric meds, but I'm getting ahead of myself here because I feel like I first need to talk about what food addiction is. Food addiction is chemical and or psychological addiction to foods and certain food ingredients. Most food addicts or compulsive overeaters have issues with foods like sugars, and that's all added sugars. It could be white sugar, brown sugar, honey, high fructose corn syrup, anything that is an added sugar that's added to something is something that we have problems with sometimes. Artificial sweeteners are problems for a lot of people, like saccharin, aspartame, and sucralose. Natural sweeteners like stevia and monk fruit are a problem for some people. Wheat and flour, refined greens like cornstarch, fatty and salty foods like potato chips, fried chicken, pork rinds. Those are all an issue for people that live with food addiction. Each compulsive eater or food addict is a little bit different, and foods that might be a problem for one person who is a compulsive overeater might not be a problem for another person, and there are different recovery programs that have different approaches on how to deal with addictive or alcoholic foods. In most of the programs, abstinence to the compulsive overeater or food addict is what sobriety is to the alcoholic. The new DSMTR We had a new DSM 5 TR that came out this year to replace the original DSM 5. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders, and it did not include a food addiction diagnosis. And this is not because there is no problem with food addiction. The problem is very widespread. The reasons why food addiction was not included or was excluded is probably because of political reasons. The food industry is got a lot of money and a lot of powerful lobbyists that have pushed people not knowing the complete truth, because if the complete truth was put forth, there would be lawsuits, and there would also be treatment facilities for people with food addiction. One thing that the DSM-5 TR recognized that the other DSMs also recognized was binge eating disorder. Criteria is eating large portions within a 2-hour period than most people would do in a similar situation. Lack of control over eating, eating more rapidly, eating until feeling uncomfortably full, eating large amounts when not physically hungry, eating alone due to embarrassment by how much one is eating, feeling disgusted with oneself, depressed, or guilty after overeating, and the binge eating is present at least 1 day a week in a 3-month period. And people with food addiction and the dependency issues usually also have a binge eating disorder. Uh, Whenever I developed my issues with being severely overweight and was in my 20s during a custody issue with my daughter, where I eventually lost all contact with my daughter. Her aunt and uncle who adopted her did so deceptively, and it has been a hard thing for me to live with. At the time that everything happened, I had an unstable marriage for many years with extensive periods of abandonment by my ex-husband. There was a lot of dependence on him and a lot of codependency issues, and he is her biological father. And somewhere around the year 1998, I found myself within the rooms of Overeaters Anonymous for the first time. During the period from 1998 to present, I have been in and out of the rooms of Overeaters Anonymous, sometimes being absent for years. And during that period, I lost all contact with my daughter. I have been in and out of psychiatric hospitals and homes for mentally ill people. I went through a divorce. I went through a breakup with somebody else that I was in love with, and I moved to another city and county whenever I went through the divorce. 12-step program of Overeaters Anonymous by itself did not help me because of I just had an inability to relate to the spiritual and religious beliefs that I had as a Christian with other members who had different beliefs. It seemed like to me, whenever I was going in, that when everybody told their story, that they were almost all alike, that they had all been fat children, and that they all came into OA as atheists or agnostics and had cleverly avoided the topic of God, and that was not the case for me. Even before I was born again, I had a belief in God. I also felt that Christians were treated unfairly in a way because if somebody just uh, mentioned that they had gone to church that day or that they had read their Bible in the morning, there were negative comments made where if somebody of a different religion, say that they went to the synagogue or they went to the mosque or a different religious place, I never heard anything negative said. If somebody read out of a different religious book, nothing was negative said. But anytime that not every time, but there were times when Christians would say, hey, I went to church today, and people made negative crosstalk about it and said that they were scaring away the new people. And I don't know if they scared away new people, but they definitely scared away me. So then there was also the issue that there was a woman that was coming to the meetings that who I feel was bullied and treated unfairly, and I had found the Reformers Unanimous program, so once again I left OA, and the Reformers Unanimous is the program that's international, and it helped me a lot. It didn't help me with my eating disorder or food issues, but it helped me emotionally to put God first, and it helped me to make a habit of having a daily meditation prayer time, and it helped me to make some very positive Christian friends that were very supportive of me because I didn't have a lot of good friends for years, especially during my marriage. So it helped me recover from some of my emotional issues, and eventually I had another crisis of faith, and I left Reformers Unanimous for a period, and right now, there is no Reformers Unanimous in my area, although it is in other areas of the nation and the world. But I wound up back in the OA phone meetings, and I went during the pandemic, and eventually I wound up in Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christian 12-step group for people of all addictions, and so I found the Full of Faith 12-step Christian and food addiction recovery group, and I failed at that. Full of Faith didn't work for me because it had an extremely strict, rigid rules of what I could and couldn't eat, and the rules were made universal for all people, whether they had the problem with the food or not. Now, when I say something didn't work for me, that means for me personally and not for everyone else. Other people's experiences could be different than mine. But Full of Faith, some of the rules were that you couldn't have iodized salt because iodized salt actually contained a small amount of sugar, that if food said that it had natural or artificial ingredients, that could be sugar, so you couldn't have that. You couldn't have anything that had modified food starch in the ingredient list, which is in a lot of foods. No cornstarch, and of course no flour. No oatmeal except for steel cut oats. There was no pasta made for anything. Even the pasta that's made out of lentils was forbidden. I couldn't go to the store and buy a chicken or turkey and roast it because there was sugar put in it in the processing. And so all of that made it extremely hard to follow. And so that was a problem. And so I failed at the Full of Faith recovery program, and eventually I wound up in Christian Overeaters Anonymous. It was started by a woman named Linda, and the original group tried to make itself a special focus group of Overeaters Anonymous. Overeaters Anonymous has special focus groups of people that have certain plans of eating or who have different minority groups. And so that didn't work because the regular secular Overeaters Anonymous would not allow a special focus group for Christians. So Christian Overeaters Anonymous was founded, and it was separate, not affiliated with the regular Overeaters Anonymous. But with the combination of Christian Overeaters Anonymous and the regular Overeaters Anonymous, I've been able to find recovery. The Christian Overeaters Anonymous group uses the Life Recovery Bible. It uses the big book called its title is Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's used in many other 12-step programs, including the regular Overeaters Anonymous, and we use other OA literature like Voices of Recovery and the 12 traditions, the 12 steps and 12 traditions of the Readers Anonymous called the 12 and 12. We use that. Voices of Recovery is life recovery workbook and other life recovery literature. And for years, I during my struggle and trying to find my way, I tried a lot of different diets. The first thing I tried when I was noticing that I was overweight was the slim fast diet, drink 2 shakes a day and then a regular supper. Then there was a special K diet. I tried lifestyles, like I tried veganism, where I had no animal products, and anytime I tried that, it didn't last long. Vegetarianism, where there was no meat, but I could have the eggs and dairy, and that never lasted long. I tried pescatarianism, where there was no meat other than seafood, but I was allowed eggs and dairy. The Maker's Diet, which the Maker's Diet is just following all the Old Testament dietary laws. The Paleo Diet, which is high in protein, no grains, and some produce. The ketogenic diet, I tried that. It's high protein, high fat, low carb. And one that I tried the most was the old diabetic diet that I was repeatedly given by doctors that they don't use anymore, but it's something that I was referred to over and over again. And really, it was the newer diabetic diet with the diabetic My Plate that I really started following, where I started losing weight, where I half the plate is non-starchy vegetables, and then a fourth of it is a fruit, is what I usually have, or it could be a starch like rice or a potato, and then the other fourth of it that's left is a protein. I eat a lot of seafood, especially salmon and chicken. I eat chicken breast. I don't eat bottom feeders because it disgusts me. I don't eat tilapia, even though it is kosher food. I don't eat seafood that doesn't have fins and scales, and mostly the seafood that doesn't have fins and scales are the bottom feeders. It's the shrimp, it's the crab, it's the oysters, and if you really look into what they eat and you seen things like they have a tank of water that's all filthy and a tank of water that's clean that has oysters and that came from the same source, but the oysters had eaten all that contamination. And when you eat the oysters, you're eating all that contamination. It's the same with any bottom feeder that you eat. You're eating a lot of poop and a lot of things in it that you really don't want to eat if you look into it. My food plan is reasonable where I always gone to extremes. If I'm hungry between meals, I'll have like a fruit or a vegetable, and I'm not doing extremely restrictive, and I don't completely abstain from flour, and I don't completely abstain from artificial sweeteners or stevia. I try to extremely regulate those, but I have, at this present time, I still eat them sometimes, and the fats that I try to use healthy fats, and I'm reasonable with myself and patient with myself, and I don't try to put my body through things that I shouldn't be put through.